and I'm back with a new lesson on the difference between the words or prepositions in and on. Well, recently in one of my videos, there was a huge debate upon the usage of these two prepositions. And I can understand why there was a confusion, because these two prepositions are very often confused because we're not very sure as to when to use it grammatically in the right way. So my topic for today will clear this confusion once and for all. Okay, so let's see the first point, the first criteria or the difference between the two prepositions. The first one being that when you use the word or the preposition in, you are talking about something in an enclosed space. Now, what do I mean by an enclosed space? Okay, well, do you see this? Well, this is a box, okay? And a box has an enclosed space because it has a physical limitation. So in a box, only a certain amount of things can be contained because it has a physical limitation. And that's what an enclosed space means. Okay, so let's take an example which says, she is in her room. Now, I will always use in because I'm talking about an enclosed space. Room. Your room is enclosed by 4 walls, and therefore you have a room which is an enclosed space. You can't do anything out of your room because it has 4 walls. Okay, so when I say she is in her room, I'm using the word in because I'm denoting something in a space which has a physical boundary. But the good thing about using the preposition in is the fact that you can also use in if I'm talking about an enclosed space, but a space which is virtual, or a space enclosed by virtual limitations. Let's see how. My sentence says, I have 3 new messages in my inbox. We all do a lot of texting, don't we? When you have 3 messages, you don't say, I've got 3 messages on my inbox. You say, I have 3 messages in my inbox, because we're talking about an inbox being an enclosed space, but not a physical space like a room or a box is, but a virtual space. We're talking about the memory of your inbox, which means that there is only a certain number of messages that can be contained in your inbox at one point of time because it's got a virtual limitation to it. And therefore, I will use the preposition in and not on. On the contrary, I will use on when I'm talking about a surface, okay, like a surface, a position above or outside an area, okay, either a surface or a position above or outside an area. Let's see how. Charlie had a tattoo on his arm. Why do I say on his arm and not in his arm? An arm is a surface, okay? So whatever you do on your arm, any kind of art that you do on your arm is going to be done on the surface, not within your arm. And therefore, you will use on the arm because we're talking about a surface, okay? Now, what about a position above? We talk about they sat on the bench, okay? So why do I say on the bench and not in the bench? As I've said, a position above. When you sit on the bench, you are sitting in a position above the bench. You don't sit under the bench, you sit above the bench. And therefore you say on the bench. However, if I were to change the sentence a little bit, I could say, they sat on the bench in the garden. Why would I say in the garden and not on the garden? Again, the garden is a physical space, an enclosed space with physical limitations. So I will always say they sat on the bench, on a position above the bench, in the garden, because we're talking about the garden being an enclosed space with limitations, with physical limitations. Well, the word in is used for talking about parts of the day, months, year, and season. Well, what do I mean by parts of the day? Meaning morning, afternoon, evening, or late at night. So if I'm talking about in as far as a part of the day is concerned, I could say, I drink coffee in the morning. I use the word in because I'm talking about the early part of the day, which is the morning. I can talk about in when I'm speaking of months and years and seasons too. So I can say her wedding is in July, or her wedding is in October. There was a recession in 2010. I will always use the word in when I'm specifying a particular year. Or you could say there was a recession in 2008. So we're talking about a year, and therefore I will use in. Similarly, when I talk about seasons, which means you have your summer, your winter, your spring, the autumn, we always use in. My sentence says flowers will bloom in spring, because they do bloom in spring. And when I'm talking about the season, I will always use in. Now let's see when I will use on. I will use on when I'm talking about days, which means Monday to Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and dates, the 3rd of August, the 4th of July, and special holidays, meaning Easter Sunday, Christmas Eve, New Year's Eve, and a lot of other holidays that all of you celebrate out there, depending on what part of the world you are in. So if I'm talking about days, I can say, I'll talk to you on Friday. You will never say, I will call you in Sunday. I will call you on a Sunday. Or I go to work on Monday, okay? The robbery occurred on January 14th. When you are specifying a particular date, not a day, but a date, you will always use on. So you use on when you're talking about a day, between Monday to Sunday, and you also use on to specify a particular date. Now you also use on for special holidays, as I mentioned. So I can say, we party hard on New Year's Eve, which we just recently did, didn't we? So, well, talking about dates, days, and special holidays will always have the word on, as opposed to in, which talks about parts of the day, months, years, and seasons. Well, the preposition in is also used with names of cities, towns, states, and countries. Okay, so when I use the word in, make sure you club it with the name of a city, a town, a state, or a country. In these cases, you will never use the word on. Okay, let's see how. There are celebrities in Los Angeles, or the maximum number of celebrities live in Los Angeles. You will never say they live on Los Angeles, because we're talking about cities. We're talking about towns or states, or even maybe a specific country. An example like football is a big sport in Brazil, I will never say on Brazil because I'm talking about a country, okay? And that's when I use the word in. On the contrary, I will use the word on or the preposition on when I'm talking about a street name or the name of a road that I'm living in or that I happen to know. So I will say, I live on Pedder Road. So I'm talking about a road that I am residing in. That's where I'm living in. Okay, so I live on Pedder Road. I will never say I live in Pedder Road. Or I could say, I live on Elm Street. Again, I use the word on because I'm talking about a street name. Well, that's it from me on this lesson on the difference between the two prepositions, which are often confused, that is, the words in and on. Well, I hope you found it very interesting, but I'd like to know how much you've learned. So please take a test. All you've got to do is click onto the link in the description at the end of this video and see how much you've scored. Until then, this is me saying goodbye.